So I'm gonna go raw today. I'm gonna be very honest. So apologies if I offend in advance, yeah? Ultimately, today we're gonna be talking about code switching. And code switching is the practice of alternating between two or more languages or varieties of language within a conversation, yeah? Code switching. And I myself am a master code switcher. Even to speak to you right now at this moment, I am switching the code, yeah? I'm a prolific, well-versed switcher of code, yeah? And there are some benefits and there are some woes when it comes to switching code. I would say there's a huge tax, there's a huge weight and a burden when it comes to switching code, but then there's also an edge, a huge advantage, and many benefits. And I'll say the biggest of those benefits actually begin with the letter A. Can anyone guess what that letter is? You can shout at me. Attitude? No, in terms of the benefits, A for access. Switching code provides access. And the simplest way to illustrate that actually is, let's say most of us are casually dressed in this room. Let's say it tickled our fancy, we want to go over to Mayfair, we want to go to a certain establishment, maybe it's after 6, and we have the intention, we have our pockets are lined with coins, we're able to go and spend, you know, we're with our group of friends, and it's a stone throw away. However, unless we adhere to the protocols of that environment, they won't permit us access, yeah? So what we'll actually have to do is dash to our wardrobes, wherever they are. We're gonna have to change clothes. I mean, depending on the venue, we might have to even don a dinner jacket because the dress code is that of smart wear. So in order to gain access into that space, we have to adhere to their code. But the definition of smart wear is an odd one because when it comes to fashion, it's all about expression, right? Fashion's around individuality. And I mean, fashion, everyone can agree that it has a huge, huge spectrum. You know, however, someone decided that one tilt has the monopoly on what is smart. Like somehow, if I go and put on the dinner jacket, I'm now more educated, more sophisticated. I mean, the only way my knowledge increased is by the commute, reading the book on my way to go and get that jacket. So ultimately, we need to figure out where these things came from. But I mean, it's neither good or bad, it's neither hit or miss. But the benefit of switching the code is access. I've actually been referred to by many as a chameleon. Some say it, you know, as a compliment. You know, they're commending me for my ability to switch the code. It's like, hey, you chameleon. And then there's others that go, you chameleon. And they say it quite backhandedly. Both are accurate, by the way. I am a chameleon. I think I'm beyond a chameleon. I think I am a literal shapeshifter. I have learned to be able to exist simultaneously in different worlds. And I mean, even my posture changes. The octave in my voice changes. I mean, how long I hold someone's hand, the duration of that changes. Everything is affected by who I meet. It's like a constant changing of scenes for a constant traveling of genres. And I have traveled genres. You know, I mean, what it didn't say in terms of my intro is that I'm also an entrepreneur. I mean, I've climbed mountains, literally attempted different things in terms of rowing across oceans and all the rest of it. But I mean, every new arena warrants a new code. You know, so you have to learn the code, you have to move according to the code. And I'm not here to say whether it's right or wrong. I'm just here to say that that is the reality. And in my life, I must be honest, I shake hands for a living, and I haven't come across someone else that is as good in this city as me at switching code. That's just the reality. And I've had the best teachers. I had the best tutors. My informal classroom was actually my home, yeah? My parents came from West Africa, Ghana, as illegal immigrants into the country, and they had to learn to switch the code very fast. And as you can imagine, it's a far cry, from the west of Africa to the southwest of London. Yeah, I promise you. The difference is stark, yeah? And I would see my mum and my father every time they would answer the phone, and then the person on the other end was maybe indigenous to the UK. I would hear them put on their best, "I have a passport, please don't kick me out" voice. And I mean, it would turn at the drop of a hat. And I'd be like, wow. And then maybe someone else may call, maybe an auntie from Ghana, and then I'll see a whole nother mum, I'm like, blimmin' heck. This is happening quite rapidly. But they did it masterfully. And they had to. They had to do it to survive. And then some of you might have read my bio and known that I was an ex-gang leader, blah, 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 blah. But the reality is, my parents didn't know, and they lived with me for years. And some people are like, how can your parents not know? I mean, if you are fully entrenched in gang activity, criminality, and gang involvement, I'm sure there's going to be some indications. But the truth is, there is a code on the streets, and there is a code at home. And I mean, in order to be able to toe it, you just come home and do the code for home, and then you leave the house and do the code for the street. So the two don't directly conflict, even though within yourself there is an inner conflict. And I experienced that. I mean, I had a huge identity and an integrity crisis, but that's my lot, and I've made the best out of it, yeah? That being said, I know that most people feel uncomfortable when you hear the words code switching. And when you hear someone like me publicly declaring, yes, I have switched code, some people feel quite sympathetic and wish, I wish you never had to switch the code. But the reality is there is a code, and you have to adhere to the protocols of every environment. And if I hadn't and said I was going to be stuck in my ways, I would have literally been stuck in my ways. So a big part of my social mobility actually came to be with my willingness. And yes, I had huge discomfort at certain points. As I said, I had an identity and an integrity crisis. I was grappling internally. And I'm like, so then who am I? Because when I'm here, it's like, how you doing, cuz? Then I'm here, I'm like, hey, buddy. And literally, I'm like, who is me? But I was set free. I mean, my deliverance, hallelujah, came from actually a Bible story and the narrative of Joseph. And just for context, Joseph was a Hebrew-born boy. He had, a doting father he was the most beloved of his father. That's what the text says. And he was envied by his siblings, his brothers. And ultimately, that envy led them to sell him into slavery. And then as a slave, he still had the gifts that kind of made him shine right from the beginning, which was around dreaming quite accurately and also interpreting dreams accurately. And then a little time had transpired. I say a little time because I was reading it, he was living it. But he was in jail for a long while. But then eventually Pharaoh said, listen, I have this dream and I need someone to interpret it. So then they were like, listen, we know this guy called Joseph. He's pretty good at what he does. You should call him up. So Joseph was summoned. He presented himself before Pharaoh and actually interpreted the dreams very accurately. And what ended up happening is that he was promoted. And I realized something as I was reading. I'm like, he's been promoted. But if he hadn't have switched the code, he would not have been given the platform to engage. And what happened is that as Hebrew men, at that time, they grew their beards, but the Egyptians of that time shunned facial hair. So in order for him to have an audience with the leader of Egypt, he had to do as the Egyptians do and shave his beard. I sat and I contemplated and I pondered and I was like, all right, it was still Joseph because the very gift he had right from the onset, all the way to that point was what he showcased. Removing the beard didn't remove his essence. So I said, all right, cool, I'm gonna shave my beard too. And I actually did. I've grown it back now, because I made it. Yeah? But I mean, like initially, I had to keep it quite clean. Sorry. I had to just have the goatee. I'll never put an earring in, because if I do it, it's gangster. If they do it, it's hipster. Don't shoot the messenger. And then ultimately, I was in three-piece suits every single day, like literally. I mean, if they're wearing a two-piece suit, I've got to do the three-piece, just for extra redemption, yeah? And it was, I would say it wasn't a tough gig, but it was a gig. It took some work, it took intentionality, and it took consistency, and I had to be quite fluid. But that again allowed me to travel genres. And with this code switching, it became apparent that the automatic assumptions that exist in our society, we're not about to undo them in a day or two, a year or two, a decade or two, a century or two. So if we want to make headway now, we're going to have to do as the Romans do. And I realized one day, I just woke up, I was like, I'm going to do poetry. I had always done rap, but I'm like, no, I'm going to do poetry. Even though they're both lyrical in terms of art form, one has certain connotations. Like if I said, I went from wet in the bed to them wet dreams to I don't close my eyes no more when there's sex scenes. Went from a kid helping mommy bring the bags in to I'm the man, I'm gonna bring the bags in. Went from the man on my block to a has-been. Euphoma to Yasmin, sex addict to husband. To, have you ever seen the eyes on the butterfly's wings? Deep. Deep like the gaze of a glorified king. For they can overwrite. They will overwhelm eternal like they appear from another realm, another world, another life, yes, another life. I mean, immediately one connotes and suggests class and intelligence, and the other may be the opposite. But in a nutshell, with the 15 minutes I've been allotted, I'm not going to be able to allow you to truly know what it's meant for me to truly switch those codes. But my talk is around the code I couldn't switch. And the code I couldn't switch, actually, if you haven't guessed it already, is my color. I couldn't switch from black. And the only way I can really kind of allow you to walk in my shoes is by, at the height of the pandemic, when the regulations began to loosen. And maybe you had boarded a train or any public form of transport, and maybe you had a cough that you needed to get out. But you knew the stigma, the new stigma that was associated with the cough. So you had to hold that cough in. And it began to compound the scratch at the back. And you were trying to find different ways in which you can release it. Just know that that's the reality I face every day, and I'm not looking for different ways to release it. I want to stay unapologetically black. Thank you for listening.